Mafia boss was forced to serve a poor maid, but she ended up saving his life. It sounds impossible, right? A feared crime lord brought to his knees by a court order, forced to scrub floors and follow orders from a poor hotel maid who can barely pay rent. At first he's furious, humiliated, ready to destroy anyone who laughs. But then the maid he's stuck serving starts getting strange threats in the dark hotel hallways, and masked men begin hunting her like she knows something she shouldn't. That's when everything flips, because the man who once ruled the streets realizes she's caught in a deadly secret tied to the same people who betrayed him. And suddenly this poor maid isn't just someone he's stuck serving. She's the one person he can't lose. Now the hunted maid and the fallen Mafia king are trapped together, running from enemies who want them both dead. If she's the only one who can save his life, why were they trying to take hers first? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Thunder rumbled through the city's glass canyons as rain pelted the courthouse steps. Camera flashes lit up the gray morning like lightning. Journalists huddled under black umbrellas as they waited for their prey. The air crackled with anticipation. Vittorio Marchetti emerged from his Mercedes, his 6'2" frame unfolding with lethal grace. His tailored Italian suit cost more than most people made in months. The black fabric a perfect match for his cold, dark eyes. He moved like a predator, each step measured and controlled, while his security team carved a path through the press. Mr. Marchetti, any comment on the charges? Is it true you still control the city's underworld? What do you say to allegations of... He ignored them all, his expression carved from stone. At 38, retirement hadn't softened him. If anything, the whispers said he'd grown more dangerous in the shadows. His lawyers flanked him, briefcases held high against the downpour as they climbed the courthouse steps. 3 blocks away, Mira Santos sprinted through puddles, her worn sneakers already soaked through, her hotel uniform scratched beneath her thin raincoat as she checked her phone again. 7:45 in the morning. She was going to be late. Please, 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 she muttered, dodging pedestrians. What had started as a simple workplace complaint, just trying to get better safety protocols after finding suspicious activities in the service corridors, had spiraled into this circus. Now her small legal filing was somehow tangled up in a case against one of the city's most notorious former crime bosses. She burst through the courthouse doors, water dripping from her dark hair. The security line stretched forever. Mira bounced on her toes, checking the time again. 7:52. The hearing started at 8 o'clock sharp. Inside, courtroom 3, Vittorio sat with perfect posture, his broad shoulders relaxed despite the charges. This was merely an inconvenience, a game his enemies were playing. His lawyers would crush it, as they always did. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The Honorable Judge Elena Martinez presiding. The judge swept in, her robes billowing. Her sharp eyes scanned the packed gallery before landing on the defense table. Be seated. Mira slipped through the back doors, trying to be invisible as she found an empty spot in the last row. Her heart hammered. The fluorescent lights made everyone look harsh and unreal. We're here today regarding case number 23-487, Judge Martinez began. The state versus Vittorio Marchetti with an attached civilian complaint from Mira Santos. Vittorio's head turned slightly at the name, his dark gaze finding Mira in the gallery. She forced herself not to shrink under his scrutiny. Your Honor, Vittorio's lead attorney stood. We move to dismiss all charges. The prosecution has failed to... Motion denied, Judge Martinez cut in. In fact, new evidence has come to light that changes the nature of these proceedings entirely. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Vittorio's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened fractionally on the arm of his chair. The court has been presented with documented patterns of suspicious activities at the Grand Palace Hotel, activities that align with Ms. Santos's workplace safety complaint. Furthermore, political pressure has mounted to address Mr. Marchetti's continued influence in this city, despite his supposed retirement. The judge lifted a dusty legal tome. Therefore, I am invoking the Servant Clause, an obscure but still valid statute from 1923. Originally designed to reform corrupt business leaders through mandatory service, it allows the court to sentence white-collar offenders to a period of supervised labor under the direction of affected workers. Gasps filled the courtroom. Vittorio's lawyers scrambled to their feet, objecting in a chaos of voices. Even the prosecutors looked stunned. Order! The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. My decision is final. Mr. Marchetti, you are hereby sentenced to 30 days of service as Ms. Santos's subordinate assistant at the Grand Palace Hotel. You will report directly to her, follow her instructions in all work-related matters, and maintain perfect compliance with hotel policies. Mira's stomach dropped. This couldn't be happening. She watched in horror as camera phones emerged throughout the gallery, recording every moment. Your Honor, this is absurd, Vittorio spoke for the first time, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. I have businesses to run. Your businesses will have to wait. Any violation of these terms, any hint of intimidation or non-compliance, and you'll serve 5 years in federal prison instead. Judge Martinez leaned forward. This sentence begins tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. sharp. Mrs. Santos, I trust you'll provide Mr. Marchetti with appropriate orientation to his duties? Mira could barely breathe. Yes, Your Honor. Excellent. Court officers will fit Mr. Marchetti with a monitoring anklet to ensure compliance. Ms. Santos, the hotel's management, has been notified and will cooperate fully. The judge raised her gavel. This ruling is effective immediately. The gavel fell with devastating finality. The courtroom erupted in chaos as reporters rushed for the doors, phones pressed to their ears. Vittorio stood slowly, his massive frame coiled with barely contained violence, his eyes locked onto Mira's across the room. She couldn't look away from his predator's stare. In that moment, she saw past his expensive suit and careful control to something darker, something that made her pulse race with primitive fear. This man had built an empire on blood and brutality, and now she was supposed to be his boss? The court officers approached with the monitoring anklet, but Vittorio didn't break his gaze. His jaw clenched as the device was secured around his ankle, a small red light blinking to life. Tomorrow morning, this deadly man would report to her like any other hotel worker. Camera flashes strobed through the courtroom windows, capturing the moment for tomorrow's headlines. Mira clutched her cheap raincoat tighter, already imagining the target this put on her back. There was no escaping it now. In less than 24 hours, she'd be responsible for one of the most dangerous men in the city. The rain drummed harder against the windows, drawing stark shadows across Vittorio's face. His expression promised that this situation would not unfold as simply as the judge intended. Mira forced herself to stand straighter, fighting the urge to run. She was a survivor. She'd survived poverty, hard work, and worse. She could survive this too. But as Vittorio's dark gaze held hers, one thing became crystal clear. The next 30 days would change everything. The question was whether she'd emerge stronger or if she'd emerge at all. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving them in a charged silence. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., the clock would start ticking. 30 days that would force a humble hotel maid and a notorious crime boss into an impossible dance of power, danger, and something neither of them was prepared to face. Vittorio finally turned away, allowing the court officers to lead him out for processing. His shoulders were rigid with controlled fury, each step measured and deadly graceful. Mira watched him go, her hands shaking slightly as she gathered her things. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city streets clean. But nothing could wash away the reality of what had just happened. In just a few hours, she would have to face him again. Not in a courtroom, but in her workplace, her territory. She had to find the strength to handle this impossible situation. As Mira stepped out into the rain, reporters swarmed her, shoving microphones in her face. She pushed through them blindly, their questions blending into white noise. She had to get to work, had to try to explain this insanity to her supervisor, had to figure out how to survive the next month. The city swallowed her into its wet, gray morning as she hurried toward the hotel, her mind racing. Behind her, more cameras flashed as Vittorio emerged from the courthouse, his dark figure cutting through the crowd like a shark through water. Tomorrow, their worlds would collide in ways neither of them could imagine. For now, the rain fell, the city hummed, and the countdown began. In less than 24 hours, everything would change. 5:30 in the morning came too quickly. Mira Santos pushed through the staff entrance of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, her worn sneakers squeaking against the freshly mopped floor. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She'd barely slept, haunted by thoughts of what today would bring. Well, if it isn't the Mafia's new boss lady, Jenny from housekeeping called out, drawing snickers from the small group gathered near the time clock. Got your whip ready for your new helper? Mira forced a tight smile, punching in her card. It's just another workday. Just another workday? Girl, you've got Vittorio Marchetti reporting to you and... Jenny checked her phone. 25 minutes. The man probably has people killed before breakfast. Stop it, Mira muttered, adjusting her name tag with trembling fingers. More staff members filtered in, each one eyeing her with a mix of fascination and wariness. The morning news played on a small break room television, showing footage from yesterday's court ruling on repeat. Mr. Caro, the hotel manager, burst through the door in a state of barely contained panic. Ms. Xantos, my office, immediately. Mira followed him down the narrow hallway, past the rows of supply closets and industrial washing machines. Mr. Caro's office was barely bigger than a storage room, crammed with filing cabinets and a desk that had seen better days. This is unprecedented, he said, pacing the small space. The media's camped outside. Our corporate office is breathing down my neck. If anything goes wrong... I understand, Mr. Caro. I'll keep things professional. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. The court order requires us to comply or risk our operating license. But this man, his reputation... He lowered his voice. Just keep him away from the guests. Stick to empty rooms and back areas. The wall clock ticked towards 6 o'clock. Mira's stomach churned as Mr. Caro led her back to the staff entrance. Through the security monitor, they could see reporters gathering outside, cameras ready. At exactly 6 o'clock, the door opened. Vittorio Marchetti stepped inside, and the small space seemed to shrink around his presence. He wore dark work pants and a plain black t-shirt that did nothing to disguise his powerful build. Without his suit armor, he looked even more dangerous, a wolf in workman's clothing. Mr. Caro's voice quavered. Mr. Marchetti, welcome to... Skip the pleasantries, Vittorio cut in, his voice low and controlled, his dark eyes fixed on Mira. Where do we start? Mira straightened her spine. First, you'll need these. She handed him a set of staff credentials and a housekeeping uniform. Change rooms down the hall. He took the items without comment, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second. Even that brief contact sent a jolt through her system. When he returned, the blue uniform somehow made him look more imposing rather than less. The other staff members pressed against the walls as he passed, like prey animals sensing a predator. We'll start with room 523, Mira said, forcing authority into her voice. Grab that cart. Vittorio's jaw tightened, but he gripped the heavy housekeeping cart and followed her to the service elevator. In the confined space, Mira was acutely aware of his presence behind her, of how he positioned himself to keep both her and the doors in his sight line. The 5th floor was quiet this early. Mira swiped her key card and entered the recently vacated room. First, we strip the beds completely. Sheets, pillowcases, everything goes in the... She turned to find him already efficiently removing the linens, his movements precise and economical. Of course, a man like him would understand the importance of thoroughness. The bathroom needs to be sanitized, she continued. All surfaces wiped down, toilet scrubbed, fresh towels. Again, he moved with disturbing competence, handling the cleaning supplies like weapons in his arsenal. Mira found herself watching his hands, powerful hands that had probably ordered deaths, now methodically scrubbing a shower stall. They worked through the morning in tense silence, moving from room to room. Vittorio pushed the cart without complaint, lifted mattresses single-handedly to tuck sheets, and reached high corners that usually required Mira's stepstool. His efficiency was unnerving. In room 615, they ended up trapped in the narrow space between the bed and wall, his chest nearly touching her back as she demonstrated proper dusting technique. His breath stirred her hair, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You need to get under the headboard, she said, proud that her voice remained steady. There's usually dust. I know how to clean, he said, his voice rumbling too close to her ear. I was in the military before. Other ventures. That explained his precision, the way he cleared rooms by scanning corners first, how he always positioned himself facing doors. By afternoon, exhaustion began to set in. Mira's muscles ached from maintaining constant tension around him. In each room, he moved with subtle dominance, taking up space, standing too close, watching her with unblinking focus when he thought she wouldn't notice. The other maids whispered and giggled when they passed in hallways. Looking good with that mop, Mr. Marchetti, one brave soul called out, earning a glare that could freeze hell. Break time, Mira announced at 2 o'clock. 30 minutes. In the staff room, Vittorio sat alone, his presence creating an empty circle around him. He ate his sandwich with the same precision he applied to everything else, watching the room with predator's eyes. Mira forced herself to sit at his table, earning gasps from her coworkers. You're doing well with the cleaning, she said, trying to sound like a normal supervisor. He studied her face. You're not afraid to sit here. Should I be? Most people are. I can't afford to be afraid. I have a job to do. Something flickered in his eyes, respect maybe, or amusement. Yes, you do. The afternoon dragged on. They cleaned 3 more floors, changed countless beds, scrubbed toilets that probably cost more than Mira's monthly rent. Throughout it all, Vittorio remained coldly efficient, but she could feel his resentment simmering beneath the surface. At 9:45, they finished their last room. I need to put these cleaning supplies away, Mira said, gathering bottles of chemicals from the cart. You can clock out. I'll wait. That's not necessary. I'll wait, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Mira headed to the supply room, arms full of bottles and rags. The basement corridor was dimly lit, most staff having left for the day. As she sorted supplies onto shelves, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside, followed by low voices. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. Mira froze, suddenly aware of how isolated she was, how vulnerable. The voices grew closer, then faded, but the prickle of being watched remained. She finished quickly, hands shaking slightly as she arranged the last bottles. Tomorrow would bring another day of this strange dance, trying to maintain authority over a man who radiated danger, pretending this was normal, while knowing nothing would ever be normal again. The footsteps returned, passing closer this time. Mira gripped a bottle of cleaner tightly, remembering too late that she'd sent her dangerous protector away. The light flickered again, casting strange shadows in the cramped space, and the feeling of unseen eyes grew stronger. The footsteps grew louder, echoing in the dim basement corridor. Mira's fingers tightened around the bottle of cleaner as the supply room door creaked open. 2 men in black ski masks slipped inside, their movements fluid and practiced. Her heart thundered against her ribs as they blocked the only exit. Not a sound, the taller one whispered, pressing a finger to where his lips would be beneath the mask. We just want to have a friendly chat about what you saw a few months back. Mira backed up until her spine hit the metal shelving. Cleaning supplies rattled behind her. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. The second man moved closer, boxing her in. 3rd floor, restricted wing. Those girls weren't drunk party guests like you pretended to believe. Ice flooded her veins. The memory she'd tried so hard to forget came rushing back. Young women with glassy eyes being hurried through the service corridors late at night, the way they'd stumbled like puppets with cut strings. I haven't told anyone, she whispered. I swear. See that you keep it that way. The first man leaned in, his breath hot through the mask. We know where you live, that tiny staff dorm on Parker Street, 2nd floor, apartment 215. Would be a shame if something happened to you on your walk home some night. Mira's hand trembled around the bottle. She could spray it in their eyes, but they'd catch her before she reached the door. Her other palm pressed against the cold metal shelving, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. The door burst open with explosive force. A blur of motion sent the shorter man sprawling. Vittorio stood in the doorway, wielding a wooden mop handle like a staff. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with controlled rage. The taller attacker lunged with a knife. Vittorio moved with terrifying grace, deflecting the blade with the mop handle and driving his elbow into the man's throat. As the attacker stumbled back, gasping, Vittorio swept his legs out from under him. The shorter man scrambled up, but Vittorio was already there. The mop handle cracked across his knee with surgical precision. Something snapped. The man screamed. Leave, Vittorio commanded the taller one, his voice arctic. Tell your boss this ends now. The uninjured man grabbed his partner, dragging him toward the door. This isn't over, he snarled. No, Vittorio agreed softly. It isn't. When they limped away, Mira's legs gave out. She slid down the shelving unit to sit on the cold floor, shaking violently. Vittorio knelt beside her, his movements carefully non-threatening. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Good. Wait here. He vanished into the corridor. Mira heard muffled sounds, a thud, a choked cry, quiet words spoken with lethal intent. When Vittorio returned minutes later, his knuckles were scraped, but his suit was still immaculate. Break room, he said, helping her up. You need sugar in your system. The small employee break room was mercifully empty this late. Vittorio guided her to a chair and retrieved a soda from the vending machine. The artificial cherry flavor helped ground her in reality. Tell me what you saw months ago, he said, sitting across from her. All of it. The words spilled out between sips of soda. I was cleaning the 3rd floor restricted wing. We're only supposed to go there when specifically requested. I heard voices and ducked into a supply closet. These men came through with 3 young women. The girls could barely walk. Their eyes were wrong, empty. The men were speaking another language. Russian, maybe? They had tattoos on their hands. Strange symbols. Vittorio's jaw tightened. What symbols? A cross with 3 lines through it, and something that looked like a broken crown. He cursed softly in Italian. When they threatened you that first time, what exactly did they say? That if I breathed a word about the special guests, they'd make sure I lost more than my job. Mira's hands clenched around the soda can. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that maybe they really were just drunk party girls, but you knew better. His voice was gentle, at odds with the violence she'd witnessed minutes ago. And you still filed that workplace complaint that got attached to my case. I didn't know it would lead to this. I just wanted better security cameras in the staff areas, better lighting in the basement corridors. I never meant... You did nothing wrong. Vittorio's eyes held hers. Those symbols you saw, they belong to a faction that broke away from my organization years ago. They're using this hotel as part of their operation, and now you're on their radar. Why are you telling me this? Because knowledge is power, and because you need to understand that I'm not the most dangerous person in your life right now. The implications of that made her stomach clench. Vittorio stood, offering his hand. I'll walk you to your dorm. Pack a bag tonight. Tomorrow after shift, we'll discuss safer accommodation options. I can't afford... This isn't a request, Mira, and money isn't the issue. She let him lead her through the hotel's back exits, too drained to argue. The night air was crisp, carrying the first hint of autumn. They walked in silence, his longer stride shortening to match hers. Her building was as shabby as the masked men had described. Vittorio insisted on checking her tiny apartment before letting her enter. Lock everything. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Something dark flickered in his eyes. Rest. Tomorrow will be easier. She watched from her window as he walked to his car, a subtle but expensive black sedan. He sat inside for several minutes, phone pressed to his ear before driving away. In his car, Vittorio dialed a number he hadn't used in over a year. It rang twice. Do you know what time it is? A gravelly voice answered. Matteo's men are running girls through the Grand Metropolitan. A sharp intake of breath. You're sure? Cross with 3 lines, broken crown, using the restricted wings and service corridors. Dio mio. A pause. The maid who saw them. She's marked? Yes. You know what that means, Vittorio. They can't leave witnesses who can identify the route. Vittorio's fingers tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. I know exactly what it means. Make some calls. I need everything you can find about their operation at the hotel. This isn't your problem anymore. You're out. They made it my problem. Vittorio's voice was soft, deadly. And now I'm making it theirs. He ended the call, staring up at Mira's illuminated window. She was an innocent bystander who'd stumbled into a war she didn't understand. The fact that he was legally bound to work under her supervision had just painted an even bigger target on her back. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years building walls around himself, letting his empire crumble rather than maintain the constant vigilance required to hold power. Now, through a twisted joke of fate, he was forcibly tied to a hotel maid whose quiet courage had inadvertently exposed a human trafficking ring. They would come for her again. Not tonight. They'd need to regroup, reassess now that they knew he was involved. But soon, and next time they wouldn't waste time with warnings. Vittorio pulled away from the curb, already mentally cataloging safe houses and security measures. He'd walked away from this life, but he remembered every brutal detail, every protocol, every weakness in the system. If they wanted to drag him back into the shadows, he'd show them exactly why he'd once been feared. And this time he had someone worth protecting. Mira jerked awake at dawn, her tiny dorm room still dark. The memory of masked men and Vittorio's swift violence played on repeat in her mind. She touched her throat, remembering the threat, then the shocking efficiency with which he'd protected her. The contradiction twisted her stomach into knots. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vittorio. Waiting outside. 7 minutes. She dressed quickly in her hotel uniform, smoothing the navy skirt with trembling hands. Through her window, she spotted his black sedan idling at the curb. He stood beside it, scanning the street with predatory focus. The morning staff meeting was tense. Mr. Caro wrung his hands as he addressed the housekeeping team, carefully avoiding any mention of yesterday's incident. Remember, we have VIP guests in the executive suites this week. Absolute discretion is required. Mira felt Vittorio's subtle shift beside her. His expression remained neutral, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes at the mention of the executive floor. Mr. Marchetti, Mr. Caro added nervously, please remember, you're here to assist Miss Santos, not to interact with guests. Of course. Vittorio's voice was silk over steel. Several maids shivered. As they pushed their cleaning cart down the hallway afterward, Mira gathered her courage. We need to set some ground rules. He raised an eyebrow. Do we? Yes, no touching guests or staff, no threatening anyone, and absolutely no using your reputation to intimidate people. She straightened her spine. I mean it. I don't want trouble. Trouble found you without my help. But he nodded once, accepting her terms. They fell into an uneasy rhythm over the next 3 days. Each morning began the same. His car, waiting outside, the staff meeting, then hours of methodical work. Vittorio proved surprisingly competent at housekeeping tasks, his movements precise and efficient. The hotel buzzed with gossip. Maids whispered behind their hands, watching the notorious crime boss scrub toilets and change sheets. Some laughed. Others seemed unsettled by how naturally he adapted to manual labor, as if his dangerous grace translated to any physical task. Did you see him yesterday? Rosa whispered during their lunch break. Down on his knees, cleaning the shower grout like he was born to it. Shh, Mira hissed, noticing Vittorio's approach. He set a fresh cup of coffee in front of her without comment, then returned to fixing the squeaky wheel on their cart. By the second day, she noticed small changes. The temperamental boiler in the basement suddenly worked perfectly. The broken ice machine on the third floor hummed smoothly. When an angry businessman berated Mira about missing towels, Vittorio appeared silently beside her, his presence alone enough to make the man stammer an apology. I didn't threaten him, Vittorio said later, smirking slightly at her accusing look. I simply existed in his vicinity. The third morning dawned gray and humid. Mira's muscles ached from yesterday's deep cleaning of the banquet hall. She found Vittorio already waiting by their cart, systematically checking supplies. The executive floor today, she said, consulting her schedule. His jaw tightened fractionally. I'll handle the bathrooms. You take the beds. She wanted to argue. She was supposed to be supervising him after all. But something in his expression made her agree. They worked through the morning, the tension growing heavier with each room. Vittorio moved with increased vigilance, positioning himself between her and the doors, eyes constantly scanning. When voices echoed from the hallway, he would pause, head tilted like a predator scenting prey. During their afternoon break, Mira returned to their cart for fresh gloves. A small piece of paper fluttered from between the folded towels. Her hands shook as she read the message. You talk, you vanish. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She crumpled the note, shoving it deep in her pocket before Vittorio returned. Her mind raced. They knew where she worked, where she lived. They'd gotten close enough to plant the threat without anyone noticing. She couldn't live like this. Through the rest of their shift, she forced herself to act normal, fighting waves of panic. Vittorio watched her more closely than usual, but she avoided his gaze, mentally plotting her escape. I'll walk you up, he said when they finished, but she shook her head. I'm fine, just tired. She managed a weak smile. See you tomorrow. She waited until his car disappeared around the corner before running to her room. Her hands trembled as she threw clothes into her small suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with 3 years ago, hoping for a fresh start. Now she had to start over again. She checked the bus schedule on her phone. One last overnight route headed north, leaving in 2 hours. Perfect. She could vanish into another city, find another job. She'd done it before. Mira took one final look around the tiny space that had been her home. A few photos on the dresser, cheap curtains she'd sewn herself, the extra blanket she'd splurged on last winter. She could only take what fit in her suitcase. The night air was cool as she hurried to the bus station, jumping at every shadow. She bought a ticket with cash, then huddled in the waiting area, watching the door. Every time it opened, her heart stopped, expecting Vittorio's tall frame or masked figures. The bus arrived right on schedule. Mira boarded quickly, choosing a seat near the back. As they pulled away from the station, she pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. She'd thought she was finally building something stable here, a steady job, a few friends, even a tiny savings account. Now she was running again, leaving everything behind. But she couldn't stay, not with threats and violence circling closer every day. The bus merged onto the highway. Mira clutched her bag, trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Vittorio might be legally bound to work for her, but she wasn't obligated to stay and risk her life. Let the courts sort out the mess. She had to protect herself. Still, as the city faded behind them, she couldn't shake the memory of his quiet competence, the way he'd anticipated and prevented a dozen small disasters this week. The gentle way he'd handed her coffee, the respect he'd shown for her boundaries despite his obvious power. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over his number. Then she remembered the masked men, the terror in the supply room, the note threatening to make her vanish. Mira turned off her phone and tucked it away. Better to disappear on her own terms than wait for them to make good on their threat. The court order might bind Vittorio to her, but she was choosing freedom, even if freedom meant starting over with nothing but a suitcase and her determination to survive. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, carrying her away from danger, away from protection, away from the complicated man who'd become both her subordinate and defender. She closed her eyes, exhausted, as the bus drove into the darkness. In her pocket, the crumpled threat note pressed against her leg, a reminder of why she couldn't stay. Whatever game was being played in the shadows of that hotel, she refused to be a pawn any longer. Let someone else clean the executive floors and pretend not to see what happened behind those doors. She was done being afraid. Mira pressed her forehead against the cold bus window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of neon and shadow. Her fingers clutched the handle of her small suitcase like a lifeline. Somewhere far. From here was a quiet town where no one knew her name, where masked men didn't lurk in supply closets, where she could start fresh again. The bus hummed beneath her, carrying her into darkness. Only 3 other passengers shared the late-night ride, an elderly man dozing near the front, a woman with headphones, and a teenager buried in his phone. Mira closed her burning eyes, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She reached into her bag for a tissue and froze. Her fingers brushed against something glossy, something that hadn't been there when she packed. With trembling hands, she pulled out a photograph, then had to clamp her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. It was Anna, one of the newer maids from the 3rd floor. In the photo, she lay crumpled on a concrete floor, face swollen with bruises, hands bound behind her back. Red ink spelled out a message across the bottom. Next is you. Dark smears stained the photo's edges. Blood. Fresh blood. Bile rose in Mira's throat. She shoved the photo back into her bag, head spinning. How had they gotten to her luggage? How long had they been watching, waiting? The bus's brakes squealed as they slowed suddenly. Through the window, Mira saw only empty highway stretching into blackness. They weren't anywhere near a scheduled stop. "Sorry, folks," the driver called out. "Got flagged down." The door hissed open. 3 men in black masks climbed aboard. Mira's heart stopped. She pressed herself against the window, trying to disappear into the shadows. The other passengers stirred nervously, but said nothing as the masked men moved down the aisle with deliberate slowness. They paused beside her seat. Though their faces were hidden, she felt their eyes boring into her. One man tilted his head, studying her like a cat watching a cornered mouse. He raised his hand slightly, just enough to show the gun tucked into his waistband. The message was clear. "We can reach you anywhere." Then they turned and filed off the bus as silently as they'd come. The door closed with a hiss that sounded like a whispered threat. "That's it," the driver announced, voice shaking. "We're heading back to the city. I don't get paid enough for this shit." No one protested as he executed a careful U-turn. Mira hugged her bag to her chest, feeling the photograph burning like a brand against her skin. Tears slid down her cheeks as the city's glow grew closer again. The station was deserted when they pulled in just after midnight. Mira stumbled down the steps onto empty pavement, legs weak with terror. The other passengers hurried away without looking back. Headlights swept across her as a black car pulled up to the curb. Her heart lurched, but then the familiar silhouette of Vittorio emerged from the driver's side. His face was carved from stone, eyes blazing with controlled fury. "How did you—" she started. "Bus company owes me favors," he cut her off. "When you missed evening check at the dorm, I made calls." She swayed on her feet, the night's horror catching up with her. "They found me. They were waiting." "Get in the car, Mira." His tone left no room for argument. She slid into the passenger seat, still clutching her bag. The leather interior smelled of expensive cologne and something metallic she didn't want to identify. Vittorio drove in silence for several minutes, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, he spoke through clenched teeth. "You cannot run from this." "I have to try," she whispered. "They're going to kill me." "No." The single word carried the weight of an oath. They won't. He pulled into an empty parking lot and turned to face her. In the dim light, his features were sharp as a blade. You're tied to this now, not just because of the court order, but because I intervened. My enemies see you as a way to hurt me. His jaw tightened. With them, you're prey. With me, you're protected. Mira pulled out the bloody photograph with shaking hands. Vittorio studied it, his expression growing darker. Anna's alive, he said after a moment. They sent her to the hospital, made it look like a mugging. She'll recover. That could have been me. It won't be. He started the car again. But you have to trust me. The truth settled over her like a lead weight. There was no escape. Not from the hotel, not from Vittorio's world, not from the violence that had claimed her life. She could run to the ends of the earth, but they would find her. Her only chance of survival now was to accept his protection. They drove back to the hotel in silence. Instead of the staff dorms, Vittorio led her to the security office. The night guard straightened nervously when they entered. Mr. Marchetti, sir, everything's ready as requested. Vittorio nodded. Show her. The guard pulled up several camera feeds on his monitors. They showed a corner room on the 4th floor with clear views of the hallway approaches and the street below. Your new quarters, Vittorio explained. Better security coverage. I've arranged for us both to work nights starting tomorrow. Fewer people, more control. The manager agreed to all this? Mira asked. A ghost of his old arrogance crossed Vittorio's face. Money opens many doors. Come, I'll show you to your room. The new space was larger than her old dorm, with actual furniture instead of built-in beds. Someone had already moved her few possessions. Fresh flowers sat on the small table, an oddly gentle touch that made her throat tight. Try to rest, Vittorio said from the doorway. I'll be close by if you need anything. Mira sat on the edge of the bed, still holding her failed escape attempt in her suitcase. I never wanted any of this. I know. His voice softened slightly. But we'll deal with it together. He closed the door, and she heard him speaking quietly to someone in the hall. Positioning guards, she realized. The sound should have frightened her, but instead, it made her feel oddly secure. She unpacked her bag with mechanical movements, hanging up the clothes she'd so hastily stuffed inside just hours ago, the bloody photograph she left inside, unable to look at it again. Finally, she curled up on the bed, too exhausted to even change. Through the window, she could see the city spread out below, glittering with false promises of escape. But there was no running from this, no safe small town waiting to hide her. She was caught in Vittorio's orbit now, bound by violence and protection, threat and safety. The night shift would start in a few hours. She would put on her uniform, pick up her cleaning cart, and pretend everything was normal. But nothing would ever be normal again. She'd crossed a line into Vittorio's world, and there was no way back. Outside her door, footsteps passed at regular intervals, guards ensuring her safety, or ensuring she stayed put. Perhaps both. Mira closed her eyes, knowing sleep would be impossible, but needing to escape reality for just a few hours. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new complications, new moments of tension with the dangerous man who had become her reluctant protector. But for now, she was safe behind locked doors and watchful eyes, hidden away from the threats that stalked the night. She thought of Anna's bruised face in the photograph and shuddered. Vittorio's words echoed in her mind. With them, you're prey. With me, you're protected. She'd chosen his protection. Now she had to live with the consequences. Mira's new room felt both larger and lonelier than her old dorm. The space held actual furniture, a real bed instead of a narrow cot, a small dresser, even a tiny table with a chair. But the upgrades only emphasized how quickly her life had changed. She unpacked her meager belongings while Vittorio prowled the perimeter like a caged predator. He checked the window locks twice, tested the door hinges, and examined every corner as if enemies might materialize from the shadows. His intensity made her nervous, but after the bus incident, she couldn't blame him. The windows are reinforced, he said, running his fingers along the frame. But keep them locked at all times. No exceptions. I know how to lock a window, Mira muttered, hanging her uniforms in the small closet. He ignored her tone. The security cameras cover both ends of the hallway. Guards will patrol every 30 minutes. He moved to inspect the bathroom. This vent is too small for entry, but we'll seal it anyway. Mira set her few photos on the dresser, her parents, long gone now, and her younger sister in California. You're acting like they'll attack any second. They might. He emerged from the bathroom, filling the doorway with his presence. These people don't play by rules, Mira. They'll strike when you least expect it. She shivered, remembering the masked men on the bus. Like you used to be? His expression hardened. Yes, which is why I know exactly what they're capable of. The next evening came too quickly. Mira reported for the night, shift feeling groggy and unsettled. The hotel transformed after dark. Corridors dimmed to save power, fewer staff around, shadows stretching long and deep. Their footsteps echoed as they pushed the cleaning cart down empty hallways. Vittorio stayed close, his body angled to keep her in sight while scanning their surroundings. When a drunk guest stumbled past, he smoothly stepped between them, his presence making the man veer wide around them. When they serviced occupied rooms, he insisted on entering first, checking the space before letting her follow. "You're hovering," she complained as they worked through their assigned floors. "I'm protecting," he corrected, helping her strip beds with military precision. In the service elevator between floors, she caught him watching her in the mirrored walls. His gaze was intense, assessing, like he was cataloging every detail of her movements. She pretended not to notice, but her skin prickled with awareness. Near midnight, they wheeled fresh linens into the basement laundry room. The industrial washers hummed, steam making the air thick and warm. Mira's hands shook as she folded sheets, remembering how easily those men had cornered her in the supply room just days ago. Vittorio noticed. Of course he noticed. He seemed to notice everything about her now. "You need to learn to defend yourself," he said quietly. She looked up, finding him much closer than expected. "What?" "Basic self-defense, enough to buy time to escape or call for help." He moved behind her, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "May I show you?" Mira hesitated, then nodded. His hand settled on her shoulders, turning her to face him. "Most attackers will try to control you here first." His fingers wrapped gently around her throat, demonstrating a chokehold without pressure. "If someone grabs you like this, you have seconds to react." His touch sent electricity down her spine. She could feel his body heat, smell his expensive cologne mixed with laundry detergent. His other hand settled on her waist, positioning her. "Plant your feet like this," he murmured. "When they grab you, don't pull back. That's instinct, but it's wrong. Step in close instead, turn your chin down, and strike up with both hands between their arms." He guided her through the movement slowly. Mira was acutely aware of every point of contact between them. His fingers on her throat, his palm at her waist, his chest barely brushing her back as he showed her how to break his hold. "Again," he said. "Faster this time." They repeated the sequence, his grip firmer now. Mira executed the escape move, but stumbled slightly. Vittorio steadied her, one arm wrapping around her waist. For a moment, they froze like that, pressed together in the steam-filled room. Her heart hammered. She could feel the coiled strength in his body, the lethal capability in his controlled movements. He could overpower her in seconds if he wanted to. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it sent heat pooling low in her belly. Mira jerked away, putting distance between them. "Is this how you're going to keep me in line? Make me afraid of what could happen?" "No." His voice was rough. "This is how I keep you alive when I can't be there to protect you." "And when you are there? What then?" His eyes darkened. "Then nothing touches you. Nothing." The possessive intensity in his voice made her shiver. "You're using fear to bind me to you." "I'm using whatever tools I have," he admitted without shame. "Fear, protection, training, anything that keeps you breathing. The threat is real, Mira. I won't apologize for keeping you safe." They finished the shift in tense silence, the earlier intimacy leaving them both on edge. As dawn approached, Mira's exhaustion caught up with her. She fumbled her keycard twice before getting her door open. She paused in the doorway, finding Vittorio settling into a chair positioned outside her room. "What are you doing?" "Keeping watch." He loosened his tie, making himself comfortable. "Get some sleep." "You can't stay there all day." "I can. I will." His tone left no room for argument. Mira started to protest, then stopped. The sight of him there, powerful frame relaxed but alert, already half asleep but refusing to leave his post, spoke louder than words. This wasn't just duty or court orders anymore. This was personal. She closed the door softly, listening to him shift in the chair outside. His presence should have felt suffocating, another form of captivity in this strange new life. Instead, it wrapped around her like armor, keeping the darkness at bay. Mira changed into sleep clothes, her skin still tingling where he'd touched her during their training. As she crawled into bed, she could picture him out there, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. those dangerous hands relaxed in his lap as he guarded her door. The sun rose over the city, painting her windows gold, but Vittorio remained at his post. Even as his breathing deepened with exhaustion, he stayed, wordlessly proving that his protection went far beyond obligation. Mira drifted off to the quiet sounds of his presence, knowing that whatever came next, she was no longer facing it alone. Whether that was comfort or curse remained to be seen. Mira woke to the crackle of housekeeping radios outside her door. Sunlight streamed through her small window, and she noticed immediately that the chair outside was empty. Her heart sank for a moment before she spotted something on the floor, a paper cup of coffee, still steaming, with a note in precise handwriting, "Drink, you need strength." She picked up the coffee, inhaling the rich aroma. It was exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. The fact that Vittorio had noticed this detail during their shared breaks made her stomach flutter. The next 2 nights settled into a rhythm that felt both dangerous and oddly comfortable. They worked the quiet corridors together, moving from floor to floor in synchronization. During their breaks in the staff kitchen, they shared simple meals. Vittorio brought food from expensive restaurants, casually sliding portions her way as if feeding her was his right. "You're too thin," he'd say, pushing a container of pasta toward her. "I manage fine," she'd reply, but would eat anyway, watching his satisfaction when she finished every bite. The chemistry between them grew in small moments. His hand ghosting over her lower back when passing in narrow spaces, their fingers brushing as they exchanged cleaning supplies, the way his eyes followed her movements with predatory focus. On their second night, around 2 a.m, Mira was restocking a cart when a drunk guest stumbled out of the elevator. He was middle-aged, wearing an expensive but rumpled suit, reeking of scotch. "Hey, sweetheart," he slurred, backing her against the wall. "How about some extra service?" His hand grabbed her hip, fingers digging in painfully. Before Mira could react, a dark blur appeared. Vittorio seized the man's wrist, twisting it at an unnatural angle as he slammed him face first into the wall. The guest screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. "Touch her again," Vittorio growled. His voice dropped to a register that made Mira's blood run cold. "And I'll break every bone in your hand. Then I'll start on the rest of you." He increased pressure on the man's wrist, drawing another shriek. "Do you understand?" "Yes! God, yes, please!" Vittorio released him with a shove. The guest scrambled away, nearly falling in his haste to escape. In the aftermath, Mira stared at Vittorio, seeing him truly for the first time. This was the man who had ruled Chicago's underworld through calculated violence, who had made hardened criminals kneel with just a look. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his tone gentler but still thrumming with barely contained rage. She shook her head, unable to find words. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, as if fighting the urge to hunt down the guest and finish what he'd started. Later that night, they were cleaning the executive floor, all gleaming marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. Mira found Vittorio in one of the corner offices, staring out at the city lights spread below like scattered diamonds. "I was born into this," he said, without turning, his voice distant. "My father was a monster who taught his sons to be monsters. I learned to hurt people before I learned to read." Mira set down her cleaning supplies, drawn closer by this rare moment of honesty. "Matteo was different," he continued. "He came from nothing, fought his way up. I thought that made him loyal, made him understand." His jaw tightened. "I made him my second, gave him power, trust. Then he tried to take everything." "What happened?" Mira asked softly. "He turned my own people against me. Started a war that left half my territory in chaos. Now he runs human trafficking through my old networks, using my reputation to shield his operations." Vittorio's reflection in the glass showed a flash of raw pain before his mask slipped back into place. "I walked away from that life, but he's forcing me back in." The confession hung between them, heavy with implications. Mira studied his profile, seeing the complexity of him, the brutal enforcer and the man who brought her coffee, the former crime lord and the protector who watched over her door. "Why are you telling me this?" He finally turned to face her. "Because you need to understand what you're caught in. Matteo's men are watching you because of what you saw, yes, but now also because of me, because hurting you would hurt me." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. This dangerous man had marked her as his to protect, and that changed everything, for better or worse. Their second night ended near dawn. Mira headed to the staff room to collect her bag, exhausted but hyper-aware of Vittorio walking a few steps behind her. The room was empty, except for the usual clutter of abandoned cups and newspapers. On the break table, centered precisely where she always sat, lay a plain white envelope with her name written in elegant script. The placement was deliberate. Only staff had access to this room, which meant someone inside the hotel was working with Matteo's people. Vittorio reached it before she could, checking the envelope for any dangerous residue or sharp edges. His expression darkened as he examined the handwriting. "I know who wrote this," he said grimly. "It's starting." Mira stared at the envelope in his hands, her momentary sense of security crumbling. Whatever fragile pattern they'd built over these nights was about to shatter, and she wasn't ready for what would replace it. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Vittorio's face as he held the envelope, his knuckles white with tension. In that sterile staff room, with dawn approaching and danger closing in, Mira realized how quickly she'd come to rely on his presence. This beautiful, lethal man who brought her coffee and broke people's bones with equal dedication. The envelope waited between them like a harbinger, threatening to destroy the delicate balance they'd found in these quiet night shifts. Whatever it contained would force them beyond the simple roles of maid and court-ordered assistant, pushing them deeper into Vittorio's dark world, where violence and protection were two sides of the same coin. Mira's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope in the staff room. Documents spilled onto the table, photographs and papers that made her stomach lurch. The images showed her talking to known criminals, accepting packages in dark corners, escorting dazed-looking young women through hotel corridors. All expertly staged, all completely false. "These aren't real," she whispered, horror climbing up her throat. I would never. Vittorio examined the forged bank statements showing suspicious deposits, his expression darkening. "They're framing you, making you look complicit." Hours crawled by like years. Around 10 in the morning, voices echoed from the lobby. Mira's heart stopped as uniformed police officers strode through the main entrance, their badges glinting under the crystal chandeliers. The hotel manager wrung his hands nearby as the officers approached Mira, where she stood frozen by the front desk. One reached for handcuffs while another held up a warrant. "Miss Santos, we're responding to allegations of criminal activity." Vittorio materialized between them, his presence filling the space like Arctic air. "You have no authority to arrest her on fabricated evidence." The lead officer's hand twitched toward his weapon, but uncertainty crossed his face. Everyone knew who Vittorio was, and with reporters already camped outside due to the servant clause story, this could explode into a media circus. "This isn't official," the officer started. "This is harassment," Vittorio cut in, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "And you know it." He backed Mira away from them, one arm curved protectively around her. The officers hesitated, caught between protocol and prudence. Vittorio seized the moment, steering her through a service door and into the maze of back corridors he'd memorized over the past week. They climbed stairs and wound through maintenance passages until reaching the top floor. Vittorio led her to a suite she knew was closed for renovations. Inside, plastic sheets covered half-finished walls, and drop cloths draped the furniture. As soon as the door locked behind them, Mira's composure shattered. Her breath came in sharp gasps as panic clawed at her chest. She pressed her hands against the wall, trying to ground herself. I can't breathe. Look at me," Vittorio commanded, turning her to face him. "Focus on my voice. You're safe." "Safe?" She gave a wild laugh. "They're going to arrest me. They made me look like I'm part of it all. I won't let them take you." "You can't stop them forever. This is my life they're destroying." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I should have run when I had the chance." "Running would have killed you," he snapped. "At least here, with me, you have protection." "Protection? You're the reason I'm a target." The words burst out before she could stop them. If I hadn't come into your life, you'd already be dead," he growled, closing the distance between them. "They were watching you long before the court case." Their faces were inches apart now, both breathing hard from fear and fury and something else entirely. The tension that had been building for days crackled in the air between them. "I hate that I need you," Mira whispered. "No," Vittorio's voice roughened. "You hate that you want me." His mouth crashed down on hers. She grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer as years of loneliness and weeks of simmering. Attraction exploded into desperate need. His hands tangled in her hair as he backed her against the wall, kissing her like a drowning man finding air. Clothes fell away between heated kisses and urgent touches. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her to the sheet-covered bed. Their coupling was fierce and tender at once, his strength tempered by unexpected gentleness, her surrender matched by demanding passion. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the dim light filtering through dusty windows. Mira traced the scars on his chest, while his fingers stroked her back. Neither spoke of what came next. They both knew the fragile peace of this moment couldn't last. Not with police below, enemies closing in, and the weight of what they'd just done changing everything between them. Outside their temporary sanctuary, danger was mounting. But here in the shadows of their hidden room, they clung to the brief illusion of safety found in each other's arms. Sunlight crept through dusty plastic sheets, casting strange shadows across the luxury suite where Mira and Vittorio lay entwined. The morning brought reality crashing back. Their passionate night now felt like a fever dream. They dressed in tense silence, stealing glances at each other. Vittorio's jaw was set hard, his protective instincts visibly heightened. Every time Mira moved, his eyes tracked her. He guided her back to her dorm room through empty service corridors before the early staff arrived. His hand lingered on her doorframe before he left, promising to return. Hours later, at a quiet cafe across town, Vittorio cornered his former soldier Marco in the bathroom. He slammed the man against the tiled wall, forearm pressed to his throat. "Who ordered the frame job on Mira?" His voice was deadly quiet. Marco choked out the answer. "Matteo. He's back. Running girls through the hotel." "Why her specifically?" She looks like Angela, the woman he killed before." Marco's words trailed off as Vittorio's grip tightened. The truth hit like ice water. Matteo, his treacherous second-in-command, had targeted Mira not just to silence her, but because she resembled his past victim. She'd become the focus of his twisted obsession. The night air felt heavy as Mira walked through the city streets, distant sirens wailing like omens. Traffic sounds echoed her racing thoughts as she weighed her options. The police station's lights beckoned, but those forged documents made her hesitate. Father Thomas at St. Michael's had once offered help. Maybe he'd know what to do. She quickened her pace toward the church, wrapping her arms around herself. A white van crawled alongside her. Before she could run, masked men grabbed her from behind. Sweet chemical fumes filled her nose as she tried to scream. Everything went black. She woke to cold concrete and blinding lights. Cameras surrounded her, their red recording lights blinking like evil eyes. Rope bit into her wrists. "Matteo's going to love this replacement," one man sneered. "You look just like her, the one he killed." Across town, Vittorio found Mira's note in her empty room. His careful control shattered. Within hours, he tore through the city's underworld, extracting information with money and violence. Every contact, every lowlife who might know something, he left no stone unturned. As evening fell, his phone buzzed. A livestream link showed Mira bound in harsh warehouse light. Matteo's voice purred through the speaker. "Watch her die, old friend." In his darkened car, Vittorio's hands trembled. He would burn his empire to ashes to save her. In a derelict building's shadow, Vittorio checked his weapons, while 5 hardened ex-soldiers gathered around him. The livestream's audio echoed with factory sounds and distant trains, patterns he recognized from the industrial district's eastern sector. 3 warehouses match, he growled, loading his gun. Building 7 has the right acoustics. His men exchanged looks as they armed themselves. "Boss, let us handle the entry." "No." Vittorio's voice cut like steel. "I go first." 3 black SUVs moved through empty streets. Vittorio led his team through narrow alleys, past chain-link fences and loading docks. Inside the warehouse, Mira struggled against her bonds while Matteo paced before the camera. "You took everything from me," Matteo snarled. "My position, my respect. Now watch me take what you love." He raised a pistol to Mira's head. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Gunfire erupted as Vittorio's team breached from multiple points. He moved like a demon, each shot precise, each strike lethal. Bodies fell as he carved toward Mira, his eyes wild with desperate fury. Matteo spun, firing wildly. Vittorio tackled him, and they crashed into storage racks. Fists and knives flashed, blood sprayed as they tore at each other, years of betrayal fueling their rage. Vittorio took a blade to his shoulder but didn't slow. He drove his knife up through Matteo's jaw, twisting until the light left his former friend's eyes. Staggering to Mira, Vittorio collapsed before her. Blood soaked his shirt as he gripped her knees. "You changed everything," he rasped. "I can't breathe without you. I'll burn it all down, every connection, every dark deed. Just live. Please live. His men cut her free. She fell into his arms, both clinging desperately as police sirens grew closer. Through back alleys and hidden routes, they would escape. But for now, they held each other in the wreckage of his old life. 3 weeks later, Mira sat in the hotel's newly renovated cafe, watching sunlight stream through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space buzzed with life, tourists chattering over pastries, business people tapping on laptops. Everything had changed since that night at the warehouse. Vittorio had been relentless in dismantling Matteo's network, feeding information to authorities while privately ensuring survivors received care and support. He'd walked away from his criminal empire, liquidating assets to purchase the hotel through legitimate channels. The staff now enjoyed better wages, benefits, and strict protections against exploitation. Mira smiled, thinking of her cozy new apartment and the evening management classes she attended, courtesy of a mysterious scholarship everyone knew came from Vittorio. Their relationship had bloomed carefully, shared meals in her kitchen, quiet walks home, him respecting her need for independence while remaining her fierce protector. Tonight, he'd reserved the top-floor lounge, claiming a staff meeting. Instead, Mira found a private dinner waiting, city lights twinkling below. After their meal, Vittorio dropped to one knee, presenting a ring. "I once ruled through fear," he said softly. "Now I want to be known only as yours. Let me serve you, protect you, build a normal life together." Tears filled Mira's eyes as she accepted, their embrace silhouetted against the glittering skyline. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.